Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose, and today we want to introduce Celia Nicholls to you. She's here from Canada, and she's a complete whiz at cinema. The entire cliche of video store worker who's seen everything. So we're very pleased to have her here with us today to talk about First Reformed, Paul Schrader's new film, which has been getting a whole bunch of buzz. It's had like a formal big release in London. You know, it's playing art house cinemas across the UK, and I think it's his best reviewed film in many years. So let's begin with you, Celia. What did you think of it?
It was really hard to know what to make of it on a first viewing. I thought it was a little strange, kind of. I don't know. Like, I mean, immediately I kind of thought about Paul Schrader's book that he had written about Bresson, Ozu, and Dreyer and stuff. And so this has the form of there's a priest and he has a diary that he's writing in.
Yes.
But
so you're thinking of Diary of a Country Priest.
Kind of. And also, like, he's ill, he's dying of something. And there was kind of like, I think you were meant to make that connection.
Yes.
And yet, like, the content of it didn't really seem to have, it didn't kind of work in contrast with the film for me anyway, because I thought, well, it's not really a film about a crisis of faith. I don't think it's about some other kind of crisis. And
yes.
I couldn't maybe put my finger immediately on what that crisis was.
Okay, well, we'll come to that because I think that's a really good point. Mike?
Yeah.
I kind of felt like I was very nonplussed by it, as I am with this. I feel like it's a film that I'm almost sort of not qualified to talk about in a way, because it seems to be part of a kind of genre of religious, sort of slightly transcendental, meditative films that I never have got a grip on. Maybe something like Silence by Martin Scorsese is reminiscent of it, and I was the same way with that. I felt like I couldn't get to grips with it and really understand what these characters were trying to deal with and what they were going through. I was questioning Ethan Hawke's character in this. What is he despairing about? And I suppose that is one of the central questions of the film. But
well, he's always saying, you know, that what was the phrase that he used? A wise person always holds two contradictory thoughts in their mind.
Yeah.
One is hope, one is despair. And, you know, Ethan Hawke ends up not being that wise.
Yeah.
So,
at the same time, like, he's not... I mean, he has different grounds for despair than, like, the abandoned by God or something, because he does profess his faith quite energetically, and he says, I'm not having a crisis of faith. That's not what this is.
Yes. I don't think this is a religious film at all, and I think I agree with both of you. This film is not about faith to me at all.
I didn't say that.
Oh.
I think it is in a way. In fact, it's one of the things that I didn't like about Ethan Hawke's character is his slight crisis of faith. He says at one point in his diary, "Why can't I pray?" Something like that. And it sets up it's a character that I've seen before, the priest who is struggling with his faith. I feel like I've seen that and it didn't...
I didn't feel that.
I sort of didn't either. I don't know. Like, I think, because I was sort of viewing it through this prism of, like, Diary of a Country Priest. This is not like that at all for me. But I did think one thing that was quite interesting was that there's this kind of dream sequence thing with Amanda Seyfried where they're kind of floating around over the environmental devastation of Earth or whatever. It reminded me a bit of, like, so there's the moment in Diary of a Country Priest when he dies and there's no longer any imagery in the film. There's just the cross, and he says everything is grace, and like that's the moment at which he sort of like received his absolution and he does believe again and whatever. And so like there's these one definite kind of magical realist bit, and then another one where I thought, I don't know if this is or it isn't. And so that there was something going on there as well with the use of the of not strictly realist imagery anymore. Like,
I'd like to come back to talk about the look of the film, right?
Yeah.
You know, and all of that, because I think it for me that was a problem. And maybe this is a good moment to tell the plot.
Yeah.
Sure.
So that,
Yeah.
you know, people can follow it, and then kind of, you know, we can talk about this question of faith.
Okay, so the plot, roughly speaking, is Ethan Hawke is a Reverend Toller, his name is, of a very small, dwindling congregation in, I want to say, it's in New England somewhere, that type of area. It's an old church, and it's coming up to its 250th year, and it's fairly disparate. So he is visited by one of his parishioners, Mary, who's played by Amanda Seyfried, who's pregnant, and her husband. Why did she go to him in the first place? He's just having a kind of crisis himself.
But doesn't she get in touch with him because she says, "Well, I'm pregnant," and he says he doesn't want to have a baby.
Yes.
Yes.
That's the main
That's
reason.
it. He doesn't want to bring the child into the world.
Yeah.
Yes, but she does also say that he's just come out of jail.
Yeah.
You know, he's depressed. She's basically filled out a form for employment for him. So it's also worry about
his personal well-being.
Yeah.
So he kind of schedules a meeting with the husband, and there's a very long scene where the two of them talk about essentially the world is genuinely dying. How can you justify bringing a child into it? And of course, the other side of it is the child is coming, and what right do you have to kill it? It's that felt trite to me. That scene in particular. The Reverend himself is having his own sort of personal problems. He's ill, and he's dealing with a trauma from the past.
Yes.
There's a really big, popular as sort of
a mega church.
Mega church.
Yeah.
Nearby, which he's
connected to, he's a part of.
Yeah, which he's connected to. That they're part of the same community, but this mega church is also sort of taking over from him. The celebrations that are coming up for the 250th consecration of his church are being slightly co-opted by this mega church with its money and power and so on.
And mega donors as well.
Yes,
who have
yes.
Some
To me,
murky interests.
that is what the film is about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well, let's say
you know,
from here on, spoilers.
yes.
That's the
Right.
spoiler-free version. Now
Yes.
we'll talk about anything you like.
Yes.
So to me, rather than the film being about faith, which I don't think it is,
But
the film is about what is the role of the church.
Yes.
Yeah.
So here we are in a world that is destroying itself, right? And you're not allowed as a church to offer any kind of critique. Whereas 150 years ago, you were leading slaves onto the path of freedom by political involvement in the railway underground, right? The Underground Railway.
Yeah.
So I think the whole film is actually very much about that for me, yeah? Kind of, you know, what can you do? What can you act? You have a responsibility to speak truth to power. Yes.
I think at the same time though there is kind of a faith component to that because he's like settled on this course of action, which is that he's going to do a suicide bombing. So there's like a political resonance to that, but there is also like a religious connotation as well. Because it's an act that's not strictly.
It's an act that's associated with
the
Islamic
modern
terrorism.
world, yeah.
Yes.
So like it's. It makes me think. I don't know if it's like really off base, but it makes me think as well of like, well, Jesus as a political figure as well. Like he was saying all of these kind of really hot political things, and then he martyred himself because of his views that like we should all love one another and. I don't know, various other things, right? Like no money changing in the temple and I don't know what. So,
well, I mean, there's a lot in the film about this uneducated knowledge of history and the Bible spoken as truth. You know, it's famously that line where one of the kids says, "Jesus wouldn't turn the other cheek," right? Like, yeah. So I think there's a lot about it. I don't know, but I'm not sure. So when at the end, he's first going to bomb everything.
Yeah.
through himself. But then when he doesn't, he brings out the
barbed wire.
The barbed wire, which is, I think, a very kind of religious imagery.
Yeah,
it's like a crown of thorns,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
You know, and so on. So, but I don't think he's ever in doubt about his faith.
I don't think so either. That did not really come across to me.
When I said slight crisis of faith earlier, and I really meant the word slight, and I think it's more about practice than it is about belief. I don't think he's ever questioning his beliefs, but it is interesting when he says, "Why can't I pray?" There's something practical in that. And I think what's not in question is his role in the community. And that's what, and I think it's also something that I liked about Calvary, the John McDonough film, from about 4 years ago, which was quite similar. It was about a priest and his role in the community, and that was more sort of political. That was about paedophilia, I think.
Yes.
In the Catholic Church, but it reminds me of it in that what that film made me realise, as someone who's not a Christian for one thing, but also never really been religious.
Yeah.
Despite the fact I was part of a Jewish synagogue, I never really realised the role, the very central role in a really practical way that priests and other religious leaders have and play in their communities. I never really thought about that before. I've always, and I know that sounds sort of blind and stupid, but I've always considered it to be that. But I come from it was like an atheist point of view of going, why do you need them? What are they doing? They just lie and all that sort of stuff. Maybe not quite that violently.
The thing I think that was kind of interesting was, like, in comparison to Diary of a Country Piece, like, the priest in Diary of a Country Piece is a terrible priest. Like, he's not really tending his flock very effectively, and he's not helping others with their crises of faith, and he's not really even providing the sacraments very effectively and stuff. But on the other hand, that Reverend Toller is really good.
Yes, he is very good.
The children love him, as they say, and like all this kind of stuff. But I think there's a critique of the role of the church. So you see this mega church, and you see the choir, and you see the corporate funding, and you realize, of course, that for huge chunks of the U.S., particularly the rural U.S., that church is the only social life going, right? It's what organizes the choir and the cookies and the meetings and the this and the that and the AA. So, without the church, there is no social life. But that's not just a good thing. So actually, the role of the church historically, to me, is always dual in that sense. So it does do these things for the community. It's psychiatrists and all kinds of things at once. On the other hand, it's very coercive. That's the only game in town, and you better toe the path.
You do get a thing like with Christian charities where there's sort of like, we'll hand out sandwiches to the homeless if they pray with us first.
That's right. Yeah. So there's that element, and actually you see that in the film. It's what he's struggling with, right? It's like, why can't you say that something is wrong?
Because he discovers as well that, like, the main source of their funding is from this guy who's connected with the company that's involved in ruining the earth.
I know. I just think it's not very well dramatized, right? So
it was kind of like some of that stuff was a little clunky. Maybe.
I thought it was clunky.
Yeah.
And I was both fascinated by the visuals, because
you know what I really liked. So another thing that was kind of Bressonian about it maybe was that he was really good about the way he filmed Ethan Hawke's face. Like, there'd be those shots where it was like not like really really close up, but it would just be his face, and like he has a really good face actually, and so you could see him kind of like struggling. Like, we maybe didn't know strictly with what he was struggling, but you could see it in his face. Like, it was sort of like almost a Jeanne d'Arc Falconetti kind of thing. Like, it, maybe not that intense.
And you could tell what he was struggling with. I thought. Well, I could tell. I wasn't.
But that's like not. I kind of thought I liked that aspect of visual design.
It had certain elements that were very conscious. For example, there was a lot of seeing through corners. So 3/4 of the frame would be empty, and then you'd see him, further back in the corner of the frame. There's also this odd bit of editing where the shot would be cut just 2 or 3 seconds after you expected it to.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, so
that's a very Bressonian kind
yes.
of technique too.
And you know, yeah, so there's all of those things that seem kind of very deliberate. And on the other hand, for me, the film lacked texture. You know, I wanted it to have sweep, like amazing things were happening. And actually, I thought even the moment where, you know, he and Amanda Seyfried join, and actually it's this thing about almost like earthly communion, the communion of touch, rather than, you know, faith. Yeah. That it lacked visual splendor. So it's probably the shot in the film that has most going on in it. But it still didn't feel... It had no sweep.
That shot in particular felt cheap, and I think it felt cheap put together, cheaply superimposed, and that, I think, is actually the central problem of that shot. I think it could... I don't necessarily think it needs to be a kind of transform into an epic sweep. The film has its muted style, and I think it sort of suits it. It's a film that is about stoicism and loneliness. I
still think it lacks texture.
Yeah. But I wondered though if, like, you know, the really sort of the flatness of it isn't also again like this harking back to Bresson, because Bresson's films they are visually very striking.
I think you're
at times.
You're overstating Bresson,
maybe,
though.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
I mean, he is clearly influenced by Bresson, as you said. You know, but the book was called
Ozu and Dreyer as well.
Yeah.
Right? So,
and so some of the cutting is very Ozu-like,
yes, and then
actually.
there's like the Dreyer kind of
close-ups on the face.
And, stuff
and so,
like that,
but you know, and also, you know, he wrote famously on film noir and so on. So there's, you know, he's not just about Bresson.
No,
but the flatness is part of his style.
I just feel like maybe he thought that it was time to explore that in cinema, because I don't think he's ever really kind of looked at any of those things stylistically in his work to now. Maybe I don't know.
I mean, you know, for a while I saw pretty much everything that he did. He did, you know, American Gigolo and Cat People and Mishima, you know, and
it's like a lot of those are very sort of noir reflected.
And they're flat.
They are as well.
You know. So I wondered if, you know...
The one thing I thought was kind of interesting was there's this one totally random scene where he goes out and eats some sushi, and I was like, oh, it's like his kind of, his interest in Japanese
culture or something.
But like it's just plonked in here.
Yeah.
Just like...
And he talked about what sometimes you have to do what you want to do or something like that. There's no point in denying yourself something.
But then I thought like it's an I guess a postmodern auteur film, because it has like no sort of personal stamp on it, but there's all of these references or allusions maybe to all these other auteurs that he's admires.
I think you could see it as a Schrader film. You could see it. Yeah, I think characteristically and thematically. I mean, the other film that he's famous for is what was called Hardcore with George C. Scott, where he plays a preacher, and then his daughter runs away from home and gets caught up in the porn industry, and he follows her into that world, right? So, you know, this, and he's a Calvinist. He's from a very religious family. Had to escape to go to university. Yeah. So,
but he's very intense. Yes. Like he's very sort of like, you know, I mean, it's way more of a crisis of, you know.
Well, I think this film, to me, I never engaged with it.
Yeah.
It didn't touch me.
It was very distant.
Yeah, it's very cool, very distant. I thought visually it lacked texture, which is not to say that the images weren't planned. You could see how they were, and you could admire some of the compositions. And there was that wonderful image, actually, at the funeral of the young man, right? You know, where they're playing that song, and you have that barge that's all rusted and halfway into the river, and then you have an oil rig in the background. And I thought almost like the themes of the film were actually all contained within that image. Yeah. Right, you know, kind of the funeral of the idealist young man who kind of, you know, shot himself because there's no future in front of the rusted boat, you know, half-sunk boat. And then with the oil rigs, amidst all this pollution in what was obviously a pristine place once, right? But still didn't grab me.
Yeah, I could see it.
There was something the other thing I disliked about the Ethan Hawke character was his illness.
Yes.
He's ill and he's kind of throwing up and coughing. People are saying, why don't you go to the doctor? And he keeps putting it off. Eventually he does get around to going to the doctor, and the doctor suspects cancer.
Yes.
And this kind of, I think, I can't see a purpose for that in the film other than to heighten the tension when he's got the suicide vest on, because the fact that he is terminal means that it feels more likely that he will kill himself.
Yes.
And I think it would be more interesting if that weren't a part of it.
I saw that coming a mile away. Actually, as soon as he kept the vest, you just know that it's going to happen. That he's going to use it. The question is when.
Chekhov, suicide vest.
And yet, are we allowed to say?
Oh
yeah. We say lots of spoilers.
Yeah, of course he doesn't. He's stopped, which is the other very movie-ish thing.
Like, is there any significance to the fact that the young woman is named Mary and is pregnant? You know what I mean, like.
Yeah, there must be.
Yeah.
You know.
Sort of
and actually, wasn't also. And also, Joseph isn't the priest's name Joseph?
Isn't that his name? Yeah. So. But like none of it really lands, right? Because he doesn't really hammer any of it home very like he.
The priest is named Ernst. His son, who died, was named Joseph.
Was named
okay, right. Okay.
Sorry.
He doesn't ever really like. I mean, he sets up all this stuff, but there's never like really a good payoff to any of it. I guess that's the problem, right? Like, there's all these different sort of, and also they're a little bit ham-fisted, all of them. Maybe.
They're a little bit what?
Ham-fisted.
I think they are ham-fisted.
Like, yeah.
So it's like this combination. I think this is kind of a middle-brow person's idea of a complex film.
Yeah. But wait, let's think about, like, at what times did it do best? Like, what were the things that it did well, actually? Because it wasn't without stuff like that, was it? I don't think.
Well, the thing is, I mean, Paul Schrader has his admirers, and they're probably all going to come and bite me in the ass. But, I just think he's somebody who knows a lot about film.
Yes,
right,
maybe too much, in a way.
But who doesn't seem to have a flair for the medium himself,
maybe,
right? Like, I mean, all of the films that he's most famous for are the ones directed by this, primarily Taxi Driver, and I think that is the difference between Scorsese and him.
Yeah.
He's obviously got, like, really good ideas. I'm sure he writes very good screenplays.
Yeah.
Though even this one, I wish somebody else had come on and kind of put it together a bit better.
Yeah.
Right? Because it is full of, like, interesting ideas, but I don't think they're fleshed out,
No.
very consistently or well.
I agree. Yeah.
And certainly it's not sophisticated enough to work on an intellectual basis where the distance and so on might be an enjoyable game.
Yeah.
And yet it's never emotionally affecting either. So I think it lacks both.
Yeah.
It's
sort of like in the middle. It's neither fish nor fowl.
That's my view.
Yeah.
So.
What did you make of the very end when he's torturing himself?
I hated that.
And then Mary
shows
shows
out
up.
of character with the whole rest of it.
I didn't get it.
No.
I mean, outside of some kind of a religious imagery, I just don't get that scene.
No.
Yeah. Kind of. So he's hurting himself. He's not even killing himself.
Doesn't he? Like Paul Schrader frequently has like self-harming. Heroes, kind of.
But it just doesn't make any sense.
No.
So if he's dying and he wants to make a statement, there are other ways of killing yourself without blowing everybody else up, like...
But it's almost like...
killed himself. But this is just hurting himself.
Yeah, like he isn't necessarily making a statement because he does then sort of don this holy white robe. Or
yeah, which you think he's then going to go,
and do. I thought he was going to go and reconsecrate the church and then...
with his blood.
Hey, what's all this blood? Yeah.
We have better ideas for the film than Schrader does.
To be fair, it's certainly unclear at that point what he's going to do, and you don't get the chance to find out because that's when he's interrupted by Mary.
Yeah.
And then they embrace, and as you say, the camera starts spinning.
It
doesn't
even spin very well.
No, it doesn't. Spin very well.
It's like the worst spin in a film.
But it's this.
My question about that though was like, is that another sequence like the one where they kind of join as one, where it's not strictly happening? Like, is that real or is that kind of a a vision that he has.
No,
there.
I took it as real.
I took
You
it as
did,
real.
okay. She comes in and she says one word. I didn't hear what she said. She said one word.
I can't remember.
No idea.
Yeah.
I can't remember what.
Because it wasn't his name. It was something else.
I didn't. I didn't make anything of it. I heard it. But,
Yeah. I couldn't either.
What I didn't like was the way you think what De Palma could have done with that swirl.
Yeah.
Or with the thorns and the blood and everything.
Yes.
Right?
With that said, I didn't hate the actual idea of it, and I think it was executed reasonably well. And it felt like an emotional payoff to me. And I get the feeling that it's something that people who critics who really like the film will probably have an issue with the end because it's too movie-ish. Actually, I didn't have a problem with that. I didn't mind that there was a little bit of that I'm a softie.
Yes.
But I didn't mind that there was a kind of emotional coming together, and you've seen there's a connection between the two of them anyway. Not necessarily seen that there's maybe an attraction, but there's definitely a connection between those two characters.
There's an attraction,
I don't like that it cuts to black. They're like The Sopranos.
I hate it.
easy.
What a stupid rip-off ending.
By the way, spoilers for The Sopranos.
Maybe we should say that there's kind of a contrast between Mary and this other woman who leads leads the super choir at the main church or whatever, and I can't remember what her name was, but she's like a very caring person, and she's asking, very solicitous about his health, and she wants to know have you gone to the doctor, and we found out it's this, is it cancer, what can I do, you should let me, and I guess there's sort of this hint that something has happened between them in the past, and she's kind of like, we should get married, and it's not very subtle, right, it's just outright some stuff happened, and then maybe she's kind of like we should get married, and then I can look after you, should be looked after or something, and then he's like a real sort of dick to her. I don't know, it's just I hate you and everything you stand for, and I'm disgusted by you.
I didn't think he was a dick to her, because the thing is, I thought that was very interesting and very well done, because it's this type of person who, under the guise of being solicitous,
it's about them.
It's about them. It's about getting what they want.
Yes.
She's only being solicitous because she wants him.
Yeah.
Right? It's just a way of getting him.
Yeah.
So I understood that perfectly, and actually I understood him perfectly.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm just saying, in contrast to the other female character, which is this Mary, and she's asking him to do all of these things, and I always thought that was going to take a turn, where she's like, oh, could you just dispose of this suicide vest, and could you just, scrape my husband's brains up off the snow and all this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? I thought this is gonna go to some really dark place, and suddenly he's implicated in some environmental terrorist plot or something like that.
If only, it might have been so much more interesting.
But I mean, sort of out of nowhere, she just comes in, right, and suddenly it's no ask is too big, and he's kind of.
Well, she does say, can you find someone to do this for me?
Yes,
right? So, and actually that's where you see that there is a mutual attraction, because, he says, oh, I'll do it myself, and, and that's, but it's done quite, that's quite subtle, because you could see it growing.
Yeah.
It's not something immediate. And actually, that's the opposite of the coercive woman, so something happens between them that happens to both of them.
Yeah.
Whereas the other one, it's she clearly is out to get him, when he clearly doesn't want it.
Her name's Esther, by the way.
Esther.
And if I could, but if I could remember my Bible, I would tell you what Esther did, but I can't.
I should know that Esther was married to somebody.
Nebuchadnezzar or someone, some king, and she's got something to do with Purim. I remember that.
Right. Well, I don't.
That's fucking pointless. Trying to remember any of that.
I don't think it.
I always get it confused with whoever.
It did lead to one of the best moments in the film where he is a dick to her and tells her. I can't remember exactly the phrasing.
He said I hate what you bring out in me. Or
I despise you.
I despise you, and the version of me or what I become.
Yeah, and then he says something unbelievably cruel to her, dismissive of her. She describes it as something so insulting. I can't remember what it is, but that moment you could hear like sharp intakes of breath throughout the room.
That's true.
That connected with people that moment.
Mm.
And I mean, And I suppose it's a bang on. Like he says, I don't like this version of me, and you haven't seen that version of him until just then.
Yeah.
You go, holy crap, this guy's got dimensions. He can go dark.
I've been looking at Esther and,
Yeah, it's a complicated enough story that you can't be bothered to read it.
Gotta get a clear answer on that one.
Exactly.
So, it was an interesting film. It certainly gave us a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
But it was very unsatisfactory.
Yeah.
Yeah,
unsatisfying. Even, maybe, like, I don't know.
Well, it was both unsatisfying, and because it was unsatisfying, it's unsatisfactory.
Yes, that's right.
Do any of you want to add anything to that?
Well, I guess, like, for me, okay, like, I know everybody loves all of the Richard Linklater films, the Sunset films, and have Ethan Hawke in them.
I love
whatever,
them.
and he's just never really grabbed me as an actor before, but actually in this, I was sort of, like, very taken with him. He was really, like...
He's
doing
wonderful.
a lot with not much.
I think he's wonderful in Parenthood.
Boyhood, you mean?
Boyhood, sorry.
Okay,
yeah.
I hadn't seen Boyhood.
Oh,
but
Boyhood's
like he
fantastic.
has a really beautiful face. Like he was
like a teen idol, right?
Yeah. But I mean, like now, like and in this film,
well,
it was
now
just kind of like not beautiful, like pretty.
Yeah.
But just like there was such
character.
Yeah, and I think like there were moments in the film where you could see that, and I kind of appreciated it for that. Maybe that's very shallow.
No, because I think it was expressive.
Yeah, like he was really, and so that way it was very unlike Bresson, where everybody's really a stone face in all of those films, and so he was like, almost a silent film actor in some of those scenes where it was like he was just kind of like from the shoulders up, and I was very taken with him in a way that I don't think I've ever been before.
I like him more and more because there was a sense,
like
particularly,
as he ages, kind of. There's more. It's like layers coming in, kind of.
In the first Sunset film, it's almost like he's too full of himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something. I mean, I love him in it, and I love the film.
The character is quite full of himself.
Yeah, but it's a bit off-putting.
Yeah.
Whereas actually, I think he's also trying more interesting roles.
Yes, I guess that's true.
And he's doing more interesting things.
Yeah,
and he's working with more interesting people.
I love him in Training Day.
I love him in Training Day.
It's that kind of ingenue, naive. I mean, it's quite a cliche role. Those are slight archetypes in that film, but he plays it brilliantly, and I think and actually it's that is kind of when he's on the younger side. That's the point of that character, and I like that. I love Before Sunset, where it's not him so much as it is just generally the idea behind the film, the way it's made. The amazing argument scene. Before Midnight, rather, the third one. The amazing argument scene in Before Midnight where the two characters are arguing, but it kind of develops very slowly, and then it blows up, and then it dies down again, and then it blows up again, and it's like a 40-minute scene.
It's like an aria.
It's unbelievable,
It's
and
wonderful.
it's incredibly well observed.
Yeah.
Like, it's the only time I feel like I've really seen an argument that on film this is that understands how the dialogue should work in them, how these things bubble up and go away, and how they can come from out of nowhere. I thought, and again that's not specifically an Ethan Hawke thing, although obviously he's a big part of the scene. It's just a brilliant original scene in that film.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's wrap it up here. And I just kind of want to say that today is a landmark day, not only because Celia is with us, but because it's the first time that Mike and I have been recognized as being from eavesdropping at the movies in a cinema by the sound of our voices. So thank you very much, Laura.
Thank you, Laura.
Laura Craven, who talks to us on Twitter at times as well, and runs a food blog in Birmingham. She recognised us. Wasn't that lovely?
That was lovely.
It was. I was really excited to be seen with such celebrities.
Yeah. So thank you very much for listening. We welcome your input, particularly if you disagree with anything that we said and you'd like to pursue it. We are on Twitter, Facebook, SoundCloud, and iTunes. So thank you very much for listening.
Cheerio.
Bye.
Okay. Let's have some ice cream.